Have you ever walked past a funeral home at night and felt the air grow heavy, as if something more than grief lingered inside? What if I told you there's one place, hidden behind polished black doors and velvet curtains, where death itself has rules? Where the dead don't always stay quiet, and where a single mistake could cost you your soul. Tonight, I want you to step with me into the chilling world of Red 32 funerals. But before we begin, I need you to do something important. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment if this story gives you chills, because trust me, by the end, you'll want to talk about it. Now, let me tell you about William. William was not like other funeral home managers. He wasn't cold nor distant. His face carried the weight of secrets, but his voice had the calm, low tone of someone who knew things most people would never dare to imagine. Before Red 32, William had been a priest. Not a regular one, no. He belonged to a strange order that studied what most churches tried to hide, the things that slip between life and death, the whispers in the walls of graveyards, the rules you don't find in any holy book. When he left the priesthood, he didn't leave his knowledge behind. Instead, he carried it with him into the dark heart of Red 32 Funerals, a building with a history that was already cursed long before his time. You see, the land under Red 32 was never meant to hold peace. Long ago, a man named Elias Kerr owned it. Elias wasn't a good man. He was a businessman, cold and practical. When a group of miners working under his watch were trapped in a cave-in, 42 men in total, he didn't honor them with proper graves. He didn't pray for them. He buried them all together in one pit, right beneath the land where Red 32 would later stand. And next to that pit, he built something he called the settling room. That name still makes me shiver. A room for the dead to settle. What does that even mean? William said it was never meant for mourning. No, it was meant to keep the dead calm, because even then, even in Elias Kerr's day, the dead on this land had a way of not staying still. And so, when Red 32 Funerals was built years later, those who worked inside had to follow rules. Not guidelines, not traditions, rules. Rules. That meant the difference between going home alive and becoming yet another silent resident of the place. William explained these rules carefully to every new worker. He never raised his voice, but the weight in his words made you feel them deep in your bones. And tonight I'll tell you the same rules he told them. Listen carefully, because once you know them, you'll never look at a funeral home the same way again. The first rule is the most important. No one is allowed to die on the property. You may think that's strange. After all, funeral homes are full of the dead. But William was clear. These aren't the same. The dead who arrive at Red 32 have already passed somewhere else, their bodies still in waiting. But if a living person takes their last breath inside Red 32, they don't leave as a body. They stay. And when they stay, they don't rest. They become something else. William called them residents. Not spirits, not ghosts. Residents. As if once you die there, you don't just haunt. You live there in a way that no one ever should. He told a story of a delivery man who had a heart attack at the back entrance, right by the settling room door. They didn't call the police immediately. They tried to move him off the property, thinking maybe that would help. But by the time they dragged his body just a few feet past the gates, it was too late. The sound started first, a low groaning like wood being split. And then, the man's eyes opened. He didn't look at anyone. He looked at the building, as if the bricks themselves had called him back. And then he walked inside, his body stiff, his head bent. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He just joined the other residents. That's why the first rule exists. No one dies on the property. If someone collapses, you drag them outside no matter what, even if it means breaking ribs or scraping knees. Because if they die inside, you'll never get them out again. The second rule might sound almost polite. Before you embalm a body, before you make the first cut, you have to speak to it, not just any words. A phrase passed down since Elias Kerr's time. Rest easy, your journey continues. You must say it, clear and calm, as if the dead are still listening. And William swore they are. One young apprentice thought it was nonsense. He laughed about it. He skipped the phrase, thinking it was some old ritual to scare new workers. That night, while he was cleaning the instruments, he heard tapping. Soft, steady tapping, like fingernails on metal. When he turned, the body he'd worked on was sitting, upright, its eyes wide open, its jaw trembling. It didn't move fast, but it moved. Its hand shook as it reached for him, as if trying to grab and hold. By the time William found him, the boy was gone, dragged halfway into the settling room, his face frozen in terror. From then on, no one skipped the phrase. Rest easy, your journey continues. Simple words, but without them, the dead remember their anger. The third rule is about clothing. This one unsettled me the most. William said you must never cut into a body wearing red. Any other color you can remove, clean, replace. But red is dangerous. It traps things. Emotions, rage, pain. When the miners were buried, many of them had red scarves or bandanas stained with blood and dust. The color soaked up what they felt in their last moments. The fear, the fury, the pain of being left to die in the dark. And when you cut into a corpse still wrapped in red, that trapped emotion doesn't stay silent. There was once a woman, he said, laid out for autopsy. She wore a crimson dress. The new mortician, not knowing the rule, began his work without removing it. The moment his blade touched her skin, blood poured out. Not in a trickle, not in the normal flow of death, but in a gush. It sprayed across the walls, covered his face, filled the drains. And in that river of red, he swore he heard screams. Not hers, but dozens of voices crying out from underground. He survived, but his hands shook for the rest of his life. And the walls of that room? They still drip sometimes, as if the dress never left. And then, there's the last rule, the one that chilled me the most. Never recite a prayer you don't believe in. You might think that's harmless, but William said it's the most dangerous of all. The dead can tell when you lie, and worse, the forces that circle Red 32. They feed on false faith. One night, a worker panicked during a power outage. The bodies seemed to shift in the dark. He clutched his rosary and whispered a prayer, but his heart wasn't in it. He was just repeating words, hoping they'd shield him. They didn't. The shadows bent toward him, wrapping around him like smoke. His voice grew louder, desperate, but the prayer turned against him. He was found the next morning in the settling room, kneeling, his mouth still open in silent prayer, his eyes gone completely black. William's voice dropped when he told me that story. Mean every word, he said, or keep your mouth shut, and that is how Red 32 funeral survives. Not by modern science, not by embalming fluid or steel tools, but by rules. Rules that remind every worker that the dead are not just bodies. They are watching. They are listening. And sometimes, they're waiting. So the next time you pass a funeral home and feel that heavy air, ask yourself, what rules are being kept inside? And what happens if one of them is broken? If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. Tell me, which rule scares you the most? The residents who never leave? The bodies that rise if you forget the words? Or the prayers that can destroy you if you don't believe? Because Red 32 is still out there, still taking bodies, still whispering its rules to anyone brave or foolish enough to step inside. And maybe one day, you'll find yourself at its doors.